Bob will quite literally sacrifice his luck and just keep his castorice at E0S1. If you are watching this video right now, I have a very, 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 very big announcement. All right. And this has been a concern for, I think, the past couple of months. And I think as of yesterday, it has reached the maximum level of discourse, if I can say so myself. So what exactly is this announcement that I'm talking about? Essentially, what happened was this. This is not a screenshot. This is not a Photoshop. This is not edited. This is, in fact, a very, very real experience my brand new free-to-play account in Honkai Starbucks has experienced. Some of you know him as Bob. So what happened yesterday, if you guys were there for the stream, Bob managed to get a E2 castorice in a grand total of 175 summons. For context, losing a hard 50-50 most of the time is 160 pulls. Bob has managed to get what a player would have gotten in a hard pity, except he got an E2. And this led to a very, very big shift in the paradigm, in the vibes, in the community, in the viewers who were watching Bob as an example for an account that is supposed to show how making the right pooling plans can prevent power creep in HSR from being an issue for your account. And that was sort of like the entire premise of why I started Bob in the first place. All right, it is to show that you should be skipping units. You should try to just log in to a couple of main teams and make them as strong as you can. And by doing this, you can pretty much keep up with the power creep that is happening in Honkai Starbucks. Power creep 100% exists, but you can do things to mitigate this, right? So now, Bob, right, not me, Bob has come into a very interesting predicament, which I did not account for, by the way. I didn't see into the future with my matrix of prescience or mark my words, you won't live to see tomorrow. Or nope. I didn't know that Bob was going to be, quite literally, the top 3.2% 5-star luck in the entire HSR. Top 3.2%. On top of that, the number of pulls that Bob did was the bottom 34.3%. So, the amount of luck involved with Bob in a gacha game, some might say it is an extreme statistical anomaly. It is not something that I could have prevented, you could have prevented, no one could have seen this coming to Bob's account. And this is where the disparity starts to emerge, right? So I basically posted this onto my YouTube, one of my YouTube posts, I think like only 3 hours ago. And you can sort of see that, this is a little bit, right? You can sort of see that a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but like they were definitely understandably salty, right? Okay, Pokke, not gonna lie, I feel like this account, there isn't anything to prove anymore, right? It is just for fun, nothing else. If you wanted to prove power grid or check free-to-play experience, this ain't it. It is quite funny just how diabolically lucky it is, especially after that whole greedy and stupid meme, right? I did my first free-to-play 36 star with Rame joining, okay, blah, blah. I thought I was lucky, like 800 plus since 2.6, and lost so many 50-50s, blah, 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 absolutely. I lost the Scylla E1. Congrats, Pokke, there's gonna be more player shitting on Bob. Why can't creators be unlucky? Is it like a law or something? You can make 40 accounts, but as long as you're a creator, everything counts for you. So sad, this account is pointless now, you know. This is such a golden account where somebody just has insane luck. This is literally an E6 under 300 pulls. I've had enough. We need to off Bob. Or what the hell is even going on? So TLD, if you want to take a look at the comments, you can kind of just show through. But essentially, a lot of people, they were essentially very, very unhappy with the amount of luck that Bob has been getting, which, I'm gonna be real, is understandable. Nobody could have seen this coming. And if Bob were to activate the E2 castorice, it's very hard to make this account prove anything. Because the E2 castorice itself, if a free-to-play player were to see this, they go in with like a median level. And I'm not talking about top 3.2% luck. I'm talking about like median 50% luck. They would have basically broke the bank. All right, they would have done everything in their power to get an E2 S1 castorice. Nothing left, no more units. They can't pull for the next 10,000 years, and Bob still has like what, 200 pulls left. You get what I'm saying? And this basically boils down to one of the questions that I asked myself as well. Bob is no longer just a player. To a certain extent, Bob is also a creator, right? He's not MrPokke, but essentially what Bob represents as a player, it was the right choice. Like I mentioned on stream yesterday, it was the right choice for Bob as a player to go for the E2, especially after this happened. Because as a player, especially as a free-to-play player, the value of this E2 would be unprecedented. And I would dare say this E2 castorice will help a free-to-play player like Bob, albeit a very, very lucky one, last a very, 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 very long period of time, right? Like a singular E0 castorice plus, let's just say 2 more E0 units, it could not even last as long as, for example, a E2 castorice. But from the perspective of a creator, which is what Bob is right now. Bob is basically a content creator at this point. It's just that I'm basically Bob's executive, one of Bob's executive account manager, right? As a creator, Bob does have the responsibility to try and not make this relatable, because at the end of the day, luck will never be relatable in a gacha game, right? Just like how some free-to-plays can be extremely lucky, you can also be some free-to-plays that are extremely unlucky. And there's no way to quantify the degree of relatability between each player and their each account. Because at the end of the day, this is a gacha game. This is not League of Legends, this is not Elden Ring, where like the progression is almost exactly the same. As long as you play the game more, you know, without spending any money, no luck involved, you can still get to the point where you want to get to, right? But in a gacha game, where probability is like the name of the game, right? How do you win in a gacha game? It's essentially either by how much money you spend or how lucky you are. That's pretty much it, right? If you have any problems like skill issue, trace issue, level issue, not enough bad relics, you know, you swipe out a wallet, and E6 unit would easily help you solve a lot of those issues. So as a creator, Bob, fortunately or unfortunately, does have the responsibility to be like, you know what? My goal, right? This is like Bob's POV, right? My goal is not to show a E2 S1 castorice is going to be good. It is not to show that E2 S1 castorice
global passive.
Yeah, I'll read it down in 5 months, right? It is not to show that E2 S1 castorice is a good unit, a strong unit, a diabolical unit. Because you don't need Bob to show that, right? Bob's main purpose, right? The reason why Bob was born, it is to show players that by making the right pulling choices, albeit there's luck involved, as close to a accurate pulling choice as possible to make the account still keep up with the end game 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3, who knows, right? Because in current version 3, there isn't too many things for Bob to prove. Because we know that version 3 DPS are going to perform well in version 3. Right? You don't need to be a genius to know that. Oh my god, they do well right now? Holy shit, who could have known, right? It is more like in version 4 and version 5 and like all future versions. How would the investments that Bob made today impact his account going forward to the future? And this objective, it would be, whether Bob wants it or not, it would be tainted by his extremely abnormal luck. And there really isn't anything that Bob can do about it. Now, if Bob was extremely unlucky, I don't think anyone would care. I don't think anyone would relate. And people would still have the expectation for Bob to keep to his goals of defeating the endgame content while being extremely unlucky, right? They will still have the expectation where Bob can prove that this account is not bricked by luck, but you can overcome it with skill. But on the flip side, because now Bob is extremely unlucky, people wouldn't care about the expectation of the endgame anymore, because now you can beat the endgame without skill, but with luck. I hope that you guys can kind of see what I'm trying to address here, which brings me to the announcement that I'm making right now. In light of Bob's extremely abnormal pulls, Bob, not as a player, but as a creator, as a beacon, as a role model for free-to-plays, Bob will quite literally sacrifice his luck and just keep his castorice at E0S1. He doesn't need to do that. It's not his fault that he was lucky, but he is going to intentionally leave his castorice at E0S1, which means all these pulls, right, the 175 pulls, everything here, none of it matters. It is exactly the same as if Bob just hard pitted on castorice banner. It's as if Bob just spent 175 pulls for a, 80 pulls for Blade, and 85 pulls for Blade and 90 pulls for castorice. Not because he wants to, make it relatable to the free-to-plays. Not because, he wants to prove to anybody that, I don't need an E2. It's more like, I think by doing this, Bob, not really farming aura, it is more like he wants to let the world know that he is willing to sacrifice this abnormal amount of luck just to bring his entire account down to a more balanced level. So after this incident, we are just essentially gonna pretend that Bob only has a E0S1 castorice. Now, I'm sure a lot of people, especially those people that want Bob to basically shit on every single endgame with his ridiculous luck, because like I mentioned, luck shouldn't be punished in a gacha game. In fact, luck is what every single player wants in a gacha game. Everybody wants to be lucky. Everybody wants to win the lottery. You would wish it for yourself, but you wouldn't want to wish it for your creators. You wouldn't want to wish it for your friends, especially if you were unlucky in the first place. And because of that, it is not to show whether or not Bob's lack of luck or have luck, it will impact the endgame. It is more to show the fundamental mindset, the purpose of why Bob put for these units in the first place. So you can see that Bob, he did intentionally go for a E1 3B, and he did intentionally skip out Babin. And even though we did get the Eidolon right, this was a very clear decision, not impacted by luck. It is not Bob praying to God that he was lucky and he get the E1 3B, which he did, but it's more so he knows the value of a E1 3B to his account, especially when you go for, you want to pair up 3B with like any other DPS, it would be a lot more flexible compared to, let's just say, a E0 castorice or E0 mighty, alright? So, 3B was a decision not based on luck, but because, we do want to plan this account going forward. This E2 S1 castorice, or what could have been an E2 S1 castorice, this was rewarded to Bob. This was rewarded to Bob for his luck, and not because of planning. Because the initial decision that Bob wanted to go through, it was to stay at E0S1, right? But somehow, Bob got this abnormal amount of luck injection, bringing him up to the top 3.2% in the entire world. So what Bob is going to be doing right now is no longer in the mind of as a player, but as a creator, right? As a streamer, as a, guide maker for the free-to-plays, as a representative for the community that, they desperately want Bob to fail or to succeed. He's gonna intentionally just toss this out the window, pretend it doesn't exist, and his castorice would remain at E0S1. And on top of that, the decision to remove this also helps us to balance out the luck that Bob has gotten in the past 3 banners. Because let's just be real, this isn't the first time it happened, right? It happened over here It happened over here.
Yeah.
For 3 banners consecutively, Bob has been ridiculously lucky, on top of basically never losing a single 50-50. So by doing this, he also helps to make the entire account's luck as a whole be a little bit more closer to the benchmark of like how many people can actually see Bob being helpful for them, right? This was not something that he needs to do, but it's something that he wants to do. This is not something that Bob, needs for the player base, but it's something that player base deserves, right? It is not a decision that they need, but they do deserve it, right? So with that, if there ever were to come a time when Bob wants to, activate this E2 castorice, because an island is still an island, right? It would be a time where we will see how the landscape of Honkai Starbucks Endgame would have changed, most likely by version 4, version 5, etc., etc. So, for example, right now we're running an E0S1 castorice. You tell me 2 years down the road, do you think your E0S1 castorice will still be able to compete with everything else? Because I don't think so. Alright, I don't think so. So by then, if we want to, let's just say, still continuously invest in our E2 or rather the E0 castorice, I think that is a pretty good time to basically activate the islands. Not now, at least at 1 or 2 years into the future, right? So just as a reminder again, Bob's account is not to show that version 3 units perform well in version 3 environments. You don't need Bob to show that. Everybody knows that's true. It is more to show that how in version 4, 5, 6, 7, all the versions in the future, the decision that Bob make, how would that shape his roster, his pooling choices, and to a certain extent, his luck as well, right? So, yep, that is pretty much the big announcement. TLDR, Bob will still keep castorice at E0S1. He is intentionally throwing his luck away, right? Bob is throwing his luck away. He pulled E2 just for the fucking fun, just to farm the aura. Right, just yep, I got an E2S1 castorice. I'm never gonna activate it. He is basically going into Elden Ring. He could do his summons. He's not even gonna use his summons. He's not gonna use his armor. He's gonna beat Malenia with a single sword, right? That is essentially what Bob is doing. Going forward into the future, Bob's pulling decisions, relatively unchanged. We'll just pretend that Bob hit a hard pity for castorice. We're still sticking to our initial goal, which I kind of pointed. Okay, not this. I'm still sticking to our initial goal for essentially my free-to-play component packs, right? E0S1 castorice, and E0 Anexa, and then E0 Hyacinth, and eventually when we want to do vertical investment castorice team, we're gonna get our 5-star RMC. Right, that is pretty much the game plan. I do want to see what different signature light coins that these two have to offer, but unless something drastic changes, I don't think there will be too big of a difference, right? So, yep, hope this brings a bigger insight as to Bob's thought process. Hope that players wouldn't want to wish Bob death, because Bob is literally sacrificing his personal enjoyment. We are literally sacrificing Bob's personal enjoyment just so that we can maintain Bob's moral, not really moral, but like as a guideline for like the free-to-plays to sort of follow through with his journey and see how this account is gonna develop in the future, even though he sacrificed his luck. Alright. With that, I've come to the end of today's content. Let me know what you guys think about this decision. Let me know what you guys think about Bob in the future. Let me know if you guys still want to kill Bob for his insane luck, which he has already thrown out the window. And yeah, word of the day is going to be, bruh is trying to prove a point and Dawei said nope. Right? Yo, not thank you so much for subscribe, right? Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, all the best for a gacha pools. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.